Welcome to another episode of Wassup Conversations, a podcast with icons and legends of the video game industry. I'm your host, Hamid Reza Nikufar, and in this episode, my guest is a director who has a strong and unique voice in the video game industry. He's the director of mega hit RPGs like Deus Ex Human Revolution, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, and one of the best games of 2021, Guardians of the Galaxy. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest is no one but Jean-Francois Dugas from Eidos, Montreal. In our conversation, we talk about JF's childhood, his vision about the world we're living in, the history of Deus Ex, and the moment he came up with the idea of Human Revolution. We talk about the darker sequel of that game, Mankind Divided, and if there will be another Deus Ex in the future. We talk about the meaning and the soul of Guardians of the Galaxy, and if he's interested in making another comic book game. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Wassup Conversations on YouTube or in any other podcast streaming app you're listening right now. Please share the podcast with your friends if you think it'll be inspiring to them. And if you're enjoying Wassup Conversations and want to help us to do it more often, please consider donating via the link in the description. You can learn more about Wassup Conversations on my website, nikufarmusic.com, and you can find me on Twitter at hrnikufar. Many thanks to my brother Emad Omeri for producing the video version of Wassup Conversations. Thank you so much, y'all. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. I've been ready for this my entire life.
Oh yeah, my entire life. All the details.
I was just thinking, when Far Cry came out, I must have been 17, 18 or something. And
wow.
Then Human Revolution, I was 20. So yeah, took a while to finally see you and talk to you. Yeah.
Actually, Far Cry Instincts was not my first game. My first game shipped in 98, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow, must have been 7 by then. What was the game?
It was Monaco Grand Prix on the Nintendo 64.
Oh, yeah.
So
starting with racing, that's crazy.
Yeah, that was my first game as lead game designer. Yeah.
Are you interested in racing games?
These days, not as much, but I used to be a huge Formula One fan. Wow. I was waking up because most of the races are in Europe and here in America, so I had to. It's either like in the night or early in the morning, stuff like that. So I remember back in the day, I was in the house, getting off bed at 7 a.m., taking my pillow, going in the basement, opening the TV, putting my pillow and watching it on the side and everything. So I spent a lot of years watching it and being interested in it. And as I was working on those games, like I was really well versed into that field. But over the years, at some point they changed the FIA, changed the rules, and at some point it was just a bunch of cars following each other, or it was always the same team winning all the races and everything, and it started to feel less exciting, and I felt less and less compelled to wake up early to watch it. And I kind of lost it. So once in a while I will watch it. And when there's a race in Montreal, I will watch it. But I'm not as a big fan as I used to be.
How about racing games? Are you going to play Forza this year?
These days I'm playing Forza, the new Forza.
Wow, yeah. I'm playing that too.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's a blast to just do crazy things left and right and everything. So I enjoy it. I can't wait for Gran Turismo, the next one. So I like my share of car. And even though I'm not a big Formula One fan anymore, last year, I still bought the Formula One racing game, and I played with my colleagues and friends and stuff like that. So also doing my own career, my single player career. So yeah, I play some of those games still. Like even though I'm not working on these kind of games anymore.
Yeah, that's great. So Gotta congratulate you on your new masterpiece, Guardians of the Galaxy. I finished the game last week, and it was so much fun.
Really?
I gotta be honest with you. I wasn't expecting the game to be this good, but this is my favorite game of the year so far. Wow, what a huge surprise this was. And so after working on this kind of game, this huge task, what do you do afterward? What do you do to recharge yourself? How is your vacation after this works out?
Usually I take 2 or 3 months off. And right now I'm taking 3 months off. And now with the state of the world, like traveling around the world is not as compelling as it used to be, because now it's a little bit more complicated and da-da-da-da. So because when I finished Mankind Divided, I went to Iceland. And I went around the island for about 10-ish days. And it's a great way to disconnect from your last game and just like live, just experience things. Don't think about games, don't think about stuff like that. So now it's a bit different. I'm staying more home, but I can go walk around, I listen to my music, I read books, I watch TV series and movies. It's just doing things that most of the time I don't have as much time to do it, or if I have, I'm too tired and I don't want to do it. So, like recently, I just read a book and I read it in 3 days. And usually it takes me 2 months to read a book, So it's kind of because you don't have much time. So now having this time off, it's about that. Going to restaurants, starting now because things are reopening a bit more. Going to see theater, stuff like that. I'm a big hockey fan, so I bought season tickets for the Montreal Canadiens, and they suck big time this year. So it's kind of every time we go see them, like they lose, but we're like, you know what? It's a historic season because they haven't been that bad since the Second World War. So it's kind of like we need to see it. Things like that. So,
especially your games. I mean, past 2 games, Deus Ex, first one, Deus Ex, huge franchise, must have been so hard on your mind just to think about the responsibility that you had. And then working on Mankind Divided, following up your great game, and that was a huge responsibility too. And then working on a beloved Marvel game. So it's a torture, man. I realize.
Well, it's a big. They're all the 3 games you just mentioned are big games, or big. They are ambitious. Usually, when I start a project, and it's always the same thing. I'm always. I don't know where I'm going to go. Well, I have an idea where I want to go, but how I'm going to get there, I have no clue at all. There's a lot of nervousness inside of your body. You feel like very insecure. And that lasts for about 4 years, 5 years, or depending how long the game it takes to make. Because all the way through, you don't think too much about what other people think. Because if you start to give too much weight on what people think, you'll never make a decision. You need to trust your own instinct, your own gut, and you try to do it. But throughout, like Human Revolution, Mankind Divided, Guardians of the Galaxy, most of my days, I think the game suck. I think the game is not good. I think we're not. I don't think it like every breathing moment that I'm awake, but I have this constant fear of failing, and I have it from start to finish. And even though I've been doing what I'm doing for now, I'm in my 25th year, so it's almost 25 years that I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's still the same fear that inhabits me on every project constantly. So you just learn to live with it. It shouldn't stop you from moving forward and making decisions, but you need to tame it. You need to learn to live with it. You need to make it a companion along the way, as opposed as trying to get rid of it. because I feel that when I'm not scared, I won't do my best work.
Yeah.
And I need to be scared to do my best work.
Yeah, I guess.
And I always put myself, probably consciously or unconsciously, in a position to be really scared.
Yeah, I guess I heard this quote from Miyamoto. I don't remember exactly who it was. It says like, anytime you feel that you're making a good game, be sure that you're making a bad game, because you have to always have that doubt in your games. But trust me, look, the last 3 games you had, those are fucking great games. I mean, best
they're
of
okay,
the best.
right? They're okay.
Yeah, a little bit more than okay, but yeah. So let's go back to your childhood. I want to understand you. So there are these parts and memories from teenagehood years of Peter Quill and Guardians of the Galaxy. In your background, you can see that. And by just going through his stuff and looking at his room, especially at the beginning of the game, we kind of understand the path he's taken in life. And it foreshadows his personality. And by the end of the game, we understand this character arc and evolution, and it all makes sense. Let's flash back to your past and see the steps that eventually ended up making this awesome director today.
Well, I was a kid. I'm an only child, so I don't have brothers and sisters. So early on, I learned to entertain myself with myself, meaning that I was drawing. I was drawing and writing comic books. I mean, comic books. Not even close to be professional, like a kid trying to do that. I was playing a lot of. I was a huge Star Wars fan. I was playing with my toys. I was creating scenarios. I was building stories. When my friends were coming at home and we were playing games, I'm not talking video games, but let's say we decide we play basement hockey or whatever we decide to play, like the games we invent, And I was always the one who was inventing the games, establishing the rules on how we're going to play this. And so it's always been inside of me. And as I grew up, I stayed like that. Like, it's my personality. That's how I'm built. And I like to let other people come with stuff. But if like people go, oh, maybe we do A, or maybe we do B, or maybe we do C, I jump in and I'm all right. We're going to do A. It's in my temper. It's how I am. So that's how I'm built. So I went in teenage years. Well, early on, like at 10-ish years old, I discovered heavy metal, and I fell for it, especially Iron Maiden with Number of the Beast, Metallica with Kill 'Em All, stuff like that, Motley Crue with Shout at the Devil. And I was like, for me, it was eye-opening. I was like, wow, that's the best music on earth. Because before that, I was listening to Michael Jackson, Duran Duran, and things like that. I still love those artists, but I found my ex, like what I loved, and I loved video games since I'm 5 years old, playing Pong, and then I had the Atari 2600 at the beginning of the 80s, and playing all the games on that console and everything. So I was into all of these things, and then I went to school. I went to university in sociology, and then I decided to come back to college and do a degree in computer arts. And I started to work in my field that has nothing to do with video game. I was like, you work for magazines, you're using Photoshop to improve the eyes and things like that. So I was doing a bit of that. I was starting to work in a company, and Ubisoft came to Montreal. And when Ubisoft came to Montreal, I just applied, and as a QA tester, because I wanted to be a game designer. I wanted to be a creative director, but I didn't study that. I didn't and there were no schools back in the day and everything. So in my head, it was like, who am I? Who am I to say I can do this? I said, no,
Yeah.
I'll enter at the beginning of the ladder, and I will learn the craft. And then when there's an opportunity, maybe I'll climb up, and that's what I did. That's how I started.
By entering Ubisoft, you kind of was aiming to become to work in video games.
Yeah.
And did you exactly know what position are you gonna occupy? Like, I want to be a game director, because that happened, I guess, fast. And then you jumped on Far Cry. It's just such a huge franchise after Instincts. Yeah.
Well, when I started, I wanted to be a game designer. And so I started as a QA employee. After a few weeks, they put me as lead QA because the company was starting and everybody was starting. And everything was new and nobody had experience. And but they saw something in me and they put me in the leader role. And then 2-3 months in, they offered me my first gig as a lead game designer on the Formula One game I was talking about earlier. And I said, here's my chance. And I started like that. And I had a game designer with me, and he didn't have experience either. So we were totally green. Never done it before. I was like, okay, now what do we do? And I kid you not, I went on internet, I printed the entire FIA rule book for Formula One. And it's big. And it's all written by a lawyer language, like meaning that you have to read the same sentences like 3 times before you start to understand something. and I went
the first
through
draft of game design document.
Yeah, and I was highlighting all the rules or the things that, that would be cool in a game. That would be cool in a game. That in a Formula One game, I want to see that, and and it helped me to create the frame for where I would bring the game. And after that, I was like, without experience, but I guess I had the right intuition. The first question I asked myself is, as a player, do I want to feel like I'm going to take a course on how to pilot a Formula One, or do I want to be a pro that competes against the best? Because answering that question, it makes you build 2 different games. One is a simulator, and the other one is more forgiving, and it tries to keep you on the track and try to make you compete with the other ones, even though you're not a real pilot, even though you don't necessarily understand super well aerodynamics and stuff like that. So, and those are the kind of questions to this day, almost 25 years later, that I still ask myself at the beginning of the project. What are we trying to achieve? I'm not saying game design, I'm not saying the idea of the game, but what's our goal? And for example, with Human Revolution, when we started, we knew it was a game, as the original ones, I mean, especially the original one, the first one. It's a game that was praised a lot by journalists, by game developers, but it was not that well known in the mass market. It was not a game that was super successful in the mass market. But for a niche group of people, it was the best thing ever. And I was among them. I was one of the huge fans as well. But it was not necessarily something that spoke to bigger audiences. And the first question I wrote on the wall was like, how do we turn a dev game into a gamer's game? Meaning that I don't want it to be just elitist for journalists, for other devs. I want it to be approachable by people who love to play just great games and where it sounds exciting. So I just wrote that on the wall, and I didn't know where we would go with the game. I didn't know how we would answer that question, but it was the starting point. and we spent like 3-4 years to answer that question every day with all the design and all the decisions we were making. So it's a little bit how the thought process goes.
Yeah, this is something that I see in every game that you make. Exactly with Deus Ex, I guess, for example, Human Revolution. Now I was thinking about it, is it connects with people. It lets you go like, all right, you are this normal human being, not completely normal, but suddenly you get
Very normal.
augmented. But you live in a shitty world. The politics is not working. The economy is not good, and you're giving them a romantic relationship. So these are all like ropes to kind of relate to that game, and that exactly goes to Mankind Divided, and then to Guardians of the Galaxy. I guess I talked to you about the personal connection that I had with that game before, and how this game kind of, for example, for me, I lost my father 2 years ago, and when that happened, this feeling of, all right, who am I in this world now? What about my mom? Who am I to him now, to her now? And what am I going to do right now to kind of like fill that gap? And in Guardians of the Galaxy, I mean, when you look at it, it's a very colorful, beautiful game with the strange animals and crazy stuff. But crazy that 2 stories this year connected me in that level. First was Dune, the movie, and this one, Guardians of the Galaxy, the game. Yeah, and the movies didn't do that magic to me. Not that they are bad, but this one, I don't know why it connected with me, and that is the example of a good direction. That how you're gonna approach this so that it's personally kind of attachable to everyone.
Yeah, and with what you say, first, yes, it's good direction, but it's also great writers, great animators, great game designers. Like, you need a great team, because even though if you have a good direction and you don't have the team to pull it off, good direction means nothing. When we started, we knew we wanted to make a fun game. We wanted to make something light-hearted. That is totally the opposite of what Deus Ex is all about. But at the same time, we wanted it to be heartfelt. We wanted it to be a blend of fun and drama and real emotions. And to me, like, even when I work on things like Deus Ex, people ask me, "Oh, you must be a big fan of cyberpunk de genre."
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I'm not a big. I love Blade Runners. I love the Snow Crash book and stuff like that. I love these things, but am I a fan? I don't consider my a fan. I love Star Wars. It doesn't make me a science fiction crazy fan. I just love Star Wars, you know. But what interests me is the human factor. It's how technology in Deus Ex, it's how technology affects us, and how it changes us as human, how it changes our relationships and stuff like that. So with Guardians, we knew it would be humorous. We knew it would be fun. It would be kind of blockbuster, popcorn kind of video game mentality and whatnot. But we wanted it to feel like these are real characters, and real characters are flawed as well. They don't just have qualities and superpowers. And so we started to brainstorm about what the story would be about and everything. And as we were fleshing out the characters, we kind of realized they all lost something, and the story is about trying to recover what was lost. And my narrative director, Mary, she lost her parents too, like a few years ago. The two, like her mom and her dad, like within 2 or 3 months, something like that. So it's something that it was close to her in terms of like grief and everything. And she also had a talented team of writers that are very sensitive to those subjects, and they were able to write those emotions in a way that feels natural, that feels true. Even at the end with Nikki, when you're trying to convince her to reject the promise before you fight Raker at the end,
Yeah.
and you have choices how to answer to Nikki, and basically how we build this, we build it with real psychological approach about how you should talk to someone that is grieving.
Yeah.
And some answers like, oh, I will answer that. But often someone that is grieving, that is sad, doesn't want to hear about, oh, I feel sad too. I don't care that you feel sad. It's me, I'm hurting inside. And oftentimes is that it's an approach of you cannot pretend you know what the other one goes through, but you can be there in support, like just feeling love, just feeling surrounded. Sometimes it does way more than like trying to fix you by telling you something. And in the game, that's what we were also trying to do with Nikki at the end. And the choices are based on that. And the right choices to bring her to the right spot is exactly that. When Peter says, I cannot pretend I know what you're going through. But I can only tell you that when I in front of bad things, blah 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 blah, and suddenly she calms down and everything. So yeah, we were very mindful of these things, and we thought that it's a serious subject that is really sad, but mixed with a fun game with those quirky, crazy characters, it creates a nice balance that you often sway from laughing to crying, or if you're not crying, you're like, I'm not sure I'm
Yeah.
liking kind of thing,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, but it was great that we had people who went through those experiences that were able to put it in words that make sense, and actors they
Wow.
did a
What a
great
great
job
cast.
at pulling
Yeah.
it off. So it's a big part of the equation as well.
Yeah, exactly. About that part that you've mentioned when we were talking to Nikki, my first approach was, all right, this Peter dealt with kind of similar tragedies in his life. So, yeah, I understand. Peter understands. So let her know that I understand. But that was a mistake. And my second chance, I was like, oh my God, he's right. She's right. Everyone's different. But
Yeah,
the understanding should be on the subject that everyone's different. And I know that you're in a difficult position, but maybe I do not know exactly how it works. So
it's all about acknowledging the pain
yeah,
without putting yourself in front,
exactly. Yeah,
in the
yeah,
stage of the other
yeah.
person. Yeah.
Great. So let's go back again. We'll come back to Guardians 2 again. So after Ubisoft days, you went to Eidos Montreal, a huge gap in
Correct.
your career that eventually ended up in 2011's Deus Ex, Human Revolution. Happy 10-year anniversary, by the way. So
Yeah.
that game, man, Skyrim in 2011 changed the course of RPG genre, and Human Revolution sort of kicked off this cyberpunk vibe again. And that is going strong even today. So how did you end up in Eidos Montreal, and how did Deus Ex come about? The early decisions and your vision from day one.
Well, I was approached by David Alfossi, which is the head of studio here at Eidos Montreal. Back then, he was at Ubisoft too. He was approached by another person that we work with too, and to open that studio, he approached me to lead the charge on Deus Ex, and I was like, oh wow, like it's a great opportunity. And back then, I was working on an announced game at Ubisoft, and things were going well. Like I was not planning to leave or anything, and then I was approached to work on this game. And the first question I asked myself is, can I bring something to Deus Ex? If the answer is no, I will stay at Ubisoft and continue to work on my game. If I think I can bring something to the table, I will leave Ubisoft and I will make this happen. And I started to just think. It took me about a month and a half before saying yes.
Wow.
And I was pondering. And one day I was in a restaurant, I think, or at home, I can't remember. And I just had a flash. And I drew Well, back then I didn't know it was Adam Jensen, but I drew the main character, a wall, an enemy on the other side, and I made the main character flip over the wall to fall on the other side and snap the neck of the guy.
Wow.
And that was my first drawing, and that's the game. And I don't know exactly what it means. For me, it was like, it needs to be graphic, it needs to be visual, it needs to be exciting. And from that point on, I knew I would go with a third person kind of approach mixed with first person. But it was a flash. It was nothing else. Like, I didn't know, like, at that point, don't ask me, why is this? Why is that? I don't know. I just have a flash. And I presented it to the team. The team said, no, JF, that's wrong, da, 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 da. And we started to discuss, we started to brainstorm different ideas, da, da, da. And eventually we come full circle, and the guys are, I think it should be a mix of first person and third person. And yes, you're right.
And you know what? That's very, very important, again, to the connection that we have with Adam. Because when you're fully in first person, you don't see the character. You just forget about it. He's just a voice. But we kind of always see him and how he feels, how he looks. And that makes a lot of difference. So first decision on that game was very important.
Yeah, it was an important one. And as we started to brainstorm more about that flash and what I was feeling inside, it was, for me, don't get me wrong, staying in a game that you stay in the first person 100% of the time, I have no problem with that. There are great games and everything. So for me, it's not even this is better than this. It's more about, what am I trying to say? What am I trying to make players experience? It's more about that. I don't care about, is this better or is this better? No, both are relevant. Both have their strengths and their weaknesses. After that, it's a point of view about what the subject you're exploring. And since we knew we were exploring transhumanism, that we would explore what the Man 2.0 is. And that's why we decided to make a prequel instead of a sequel, because in the original game, it was all nano, so it was all inside the body. It's invincible.
Yeah.
And it's not as tangible for the main subject. And I wanted to go with mechanical augmentations and stuff like that. So it's visual, it's in your face and everything. And with this blend with third person, when he goes for the takedowns, or he use the Icarus landing system, or the Typhoon, or whatever the gadget he has and everything, you can see those augmentations at play. It's in your face. So the game constantly reminds you, you're this augmented 2.0 man. You're not just an average. It's not an intellectual concept. It's in your face. And even in the trailer, when he takes his glass of whiskey, and he has a hard time controlling his hand, and he almost breaks the glass. And it speaks to what it is. It speaks to the subject. It speaks to the emotion we want with it. So when players play the game, they're constantly, through their actions, they're constantly reminded of who they are in this world. And that was the goal. It was not about, it's better than first person or 100% first person or not. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with your subject, has to do with what you want players to experience. So I was watching on forums back in the day, and the debates about, like, oh, it should be first person all the time. Oh no, but it kind of makes sense. And to me, I was like, guys, to me, it's a pointless discussion. I love full first person, like things that are 100% first person. I love it. And when it serves the game that you're playing, great. If it's first person, and it tries to make you feel something that first person cannot make you feel, then why are you making that decision? And that's how my brain works when I create those things.
And and it's in the name, human revolution. So it's not machine revolution. So the game really goes discussing the humanity in that world, that in that advanced world they are living. So the game is really relatable. It's nothing like it's not going to fantasy. It's always kind of explainable
Grounded.
with sci-fi elements, and it's grounded. And also, do you remember that the first trailer, the game, how well it was received? I mean, that was crazy. The trailer was magnificent. I mean, I remember that time everyone remembered the line, like, "I never asked for this." So yeah. And back in those days, I never. My first Deus Ex game was Human Revolution, so I wasn't a fan. I didn't know about the original games a lot. So I remember those days. So the big fans of the game were like, "Oh, what is this? Oh, we're not sure." And we on the other side were like, "Oh my God, this is amazing! A cyberpunk game. This is crazy."
Yeah.
So and in the end, so everyone was happy, and
in the end, it worked. Yeah.
yeah. So what was the what were the sources of inspiration for that game? Where did you look for creating that? I remember you guys said that you looked at entrepreneurs back then about creating the characters.
We look at a crazy load of things. When you look at the global subject, we read a book called Radical Evolution back in the day by, I can't remember the name of the guy. We read other books that are, the titles are escaping me right now. We watched documentaries about the future. We watched, of course, we were inspired by Blade Runner. Even Johnny Mnemonic, even though it's a really bad movie, there were a lot of great ideas in there. We watch also some Japan anime like Salty Ray. I don't know if you know that anime, and it's all about augmented people too. So it's a great series, by the way. I highly recommend it. We watch other classics as well, and it was all over the place. And when it came to fashion, like Alexander McQueen was quite a great inspiration for the cyber renaissance, kind of like the puffy colors and the shoulders, the patterns and stuff like that. So when that fashion designer was alive, he was big in those influences and everything. So it was a big part of what was feeding our souls and brains. So it was all over the place. I would say we love to get inspired by stuff outside of the game industry, in the sense that yes, we're playing the other games, we're looking at what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and anything. We're doing our homework, but we love to look outside of games, because oftentimes games can feel homogeneous in many ways. Like it feels that everybody gets the same inspiration from the same movie and the same other game, kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a criticism. It's more an observation. And us, I'm not saying we're always succeeding, but we're at least we're trying to surprise players with something they haven't seen before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. For example, the look of the game looks like a Renaissance painting, and you always in the game reference to that, like, oh, remember this game looks like that, and that gold color palette is always implying that this is the moment at the peak of technology. Like this is the gold moment, but down there it's very broken. It's ugly, and the game.
That's why the black and gold.
Yeah, it shows. So, and about the fashion, I love the clothes in your games. No matter what, even in Guardians of the Galaxy, I was like, these guys know how to dress up. That's crazy. Well, they always dress pretty awesome. You guys should start a fashion department.
Yeah, a lot of those costumes, a lot of those designs were created by the same people who created Human Revolution and Mankind Divided.
Yeah.
So it's the same team. So those influences, whether you play Guardians or you play our Deus Ex games, you can see
Exactly.
you can see the connection between all of them. Visually speaking, there's a style, there's something unique about it that we always try to do something different. And with Guardians, we knew that we wanted it to be colorful, to be. We were like, you know what? Like the last 2 years with the pandemic and all the things that goes in the world, and after Mankind Divided, which was very bleak and very depressing, we were like, oh, it's with Guardians, it's time to just celebrate life
And
celebrate human beings. The end.
yeah, and you guys did it pretty good. So I'm a video game composer, and one of my favorite video game scores of all time is Michael McCann's captivating work on Deus Ex. How did you guys find him, and how did that beautiful and elevating score come about?
How did we find him? I can't remember exactly. I think my my audio director, Steve Tchaikovsky, would answer this one much better than me. I think he's the one who found him back in the day. So because we were looking for a composer, and then there were a few of them that we listened to some samples and everything, and this guy seemed to have something that was like, that's what we're looking for, kind of song.
Yeah.
And it was based in Montreal, so for us it was easier to be to go visit him, or he comes to the studio or things like that and everything. And when he started to work on this, and when he wrote the main title, you know, when you have at the beginning of the game, when you have the main credits opening,
yes.
and Adam Jensen gets on the operation table.
Piano notes. Those piano notes on the drone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember.
And it was. And when the first time we heard that, we had goosebumps.
Yeah.
We were like,
me too.
Oh, and we were like, wow, okay, that we're in for a great soundtrack. So, so it was a collaboration that started like that. It's like anything. You start a project, you know what kind of sound you want. Like we wanted something that would feel a bit more industrial when it's the scene is about augmentations and everything. And when you're with people that are resisting augmentation, is a little bit more organic and everything. So we had kind of a loose vision for what we wanted. Steve went and looked for different composers, and we listened to samples. And so the real specific story about that, Steve would be better than me to tell it. But in the big brushstroke, it's kind of bit how it happened. And the guy was crazy talented, and he wrote probably one of the best scores in video games in recent history. So
exactly right. Yeah,
we were very happy.
And everyone was copying him afterwards.
Yes. Well, it's good. You know, sometimes we get influenced by the work of other people because they did something cool, you know. And when after we ship our games, and we see after that other games or other mediums taking a page of what we did, it's like, okay, we must have done something right somewhere. Yeah. So it's always flattering. So I take it as it's good because people take it and they bring it somewhere else and they make it evolve. So I think it's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So after Human Revolution, its sequel, Mankind Divided, was released, and which I even loved more. Please tell me about the production of that game and taking everything to a deeper and darker path.
Yeah. It's this one is more complicated because, to be honest, when we finished Human Revolution, it was a one-off for us. Like we were not thinking sequels. And when we started this one, we were like, okay, let's explore the world after the events of Human Revolution, where in some part of the world, augmented people are segregated. They're put on the side as like the dangerous species. And the art direction reflects that, the music reflects that, the story reflects that to a certain degree. And ultimately, I feel that Mankind Divided is way too dark. And don't get me wrong, gameplay-wise, I agree with you. Mankind Divided is a much better game than Human Revolution in terms of playing and going in the city hubs and all the things you can discover and all the things you can do. I think it's much better. I think the game is too dark, so when you go through it, everything is heavy. You look at the art is heavy. The characters, they all have like really bad stories. The main story about terrorism, segregations, and all these things. So I feel that Human Revolution was more balanced because, like you were expressing earlier during the conversation, you were saying the gold, like it's that new height of technology that we're mastering, but at the same time we're creating a lot of bad stuff in the shadows and everything. So, but it was a balance between light and dark, like hope and bleakness. It was not just one or the other. It was kind of like it was more hopeful overall. Mankind Divided, there's nothing hopeful. That being said, how we fleshed out the city hub of Prague and like there's so many things to discover. There's so many things all over the place. The richness of it is it puts Human Revolution in its little pocket. You know, it's way better. And playing Adam Jensen, it's faster. It's much more fluid and everything. So I agree with you. It's a better game, but story wise and theme wise, I feel it was a little bit too heavy.
In Human Revolution, it came out, and I was, even today, believe that the game is not just a game, it's a kind of a study of our current world. And Mankind Divided is more realistic, unfortunately. It's more relatable to the real world we're living in right now. And that is why it's so dark. And
yes,
sometimes maybe, I don't know, keep the balance. But if that game, the first one, was more about the nature of modern human in this technologically advanced world, Mankind Divided brought politics and racial issues to the mix too. These two games are very important because if we go back to them, aside from technical standpoints, we also evaluate the message and sublayer of those games and ask if they are still relevant, if any progress has been made throughout these years. Looking back at those two games and seeing the world today, especially after COVID world, how relevant do you see them, and what are the main concerns and topics that you see today that would fit in the world of Deus Ex perfectly?
I think all of this is relevant still to this day because when you look at the state of the world, you look at like all the inequalities and stuff like that, and how people are casted in one side and people on the other side and everything, and it happens more than ever. But the good news is that it seems like there's a general wake up call, like with society trying to put a stop of all those injustices and trying to find balance and find like. When someone does something bad, it's because someone does something bad. It doesn't come with the history of who that person is or whatever. Like we need to bring it back to real justice and fairness and everything. And I think I see a lot of movements like that all over the world in reaction to a part of the world who's kind of refusing that progress kind of thing. And when I look at the Deus Ex game, it's always that. It's the people who want to embrace the future versus the ones who want to keep it tied to what they had and what they have and everything. So I still feel it's relevant. I still feel it's relevant to improve our bodies. I still feel it's relevant when you look at also, we're talking about global warming. We're talking about the state of the world is changing, pollution, like big catastrophes and everything. And we'll need to find a way to live in a harsher and harsher world. And I feel that the Deus Ex games like tap into this because it's improving ourselves to live longer, to be more healthy, to be all of these things. But it's also about to cope with an environment that sometimes is not always friendly to us. And it's those kind of things. So when I look at the Deus Ex games, yes, I believe like Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, even though they're starting to date now, they're as relevant as they can be.
Yeah. I mean, look at Mankind Divided and look at 2021, this day that the interview is happening. Look at the real world that we're living in. There's this global pandemic. There is this racial issue all over the world. Yeah. There is a global warming. But on the other side, in the technology aspect of our lives, we are introduced to Meta. We are introduced to all new applications, devices, and it's going forward. So isn't this the nature of cyberpunk? Low life, high tech. So Mankind Divided is getting more and more updated. You guys are releasing updates without releasing updates.
Well, actually, we don't realize it, but we live in a cyberpunk world today.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the cell phones are augmentations.
Huh? Exactly. The next step is you take it and you put it in your brain and you have it.
Neuralink.
It's like I was saying to one of my friend that is an ex-colleague that is anti-vaccine. And I said, no, I got my vaccine. It's fantastic. Now I have 5G in my head and I can see all the internet in my head. It's crazy. You should get vaccinated. And start to laugh. And, it's like, come on.
This is crazy. Yeah. So let's go and we got to wrap up the interview now.
Yeah.
Now that you've made, look, everyone's been asking me to ask you this about the future of Deus Ex, and I know you can't talk about that, but can you give us a word of comfort at least?
I cannot speak about Deus Ex. I cannot speak about anything really, because right now, and it's not bullshit, it's the fact that I'm in vacation.
Yeah.
And when I'm in vacation, I'm pulling the plug. Meaning that I'm resourcing myself. I'm not thinking really about what I'm going to do next. One thing at the time. Will there be a Deus Ex game in the future? I don't know. Maybe. Will there be something else? I don't know. Maybe. That has nothing to do with Deus Ex. At this point, it can be a lot of stuff. Like in my career, when you look at it, all the games I worked on, it's quite varied. Like it goes from Formula 1 to Deus Ex to Guardians to Far Cry. So I'm all over the place. To me, in the end, is all about working on something that excites me. Whether it's Deus Ex, Guardians, anything else. As long as I work with a great team and we have the opportunity to create something that will resonate with our players, I'm happy.
And you always hit the nail. But from all the fans around the world, look, this Deus Ex means a lot to us, and if you come back to it, we'll appreciate it a lot. So we'll have a trilogy, so we'll play for the rest of our lives the trilogy of Deus Ex, and that would be great. But I understand. Yeah. So now, now that you've made a Marvel game, what other characters and comics do you dream of making games for?
Am I dreaming of making games about characters? It's a very good question. I haven't thought about it. But when you look at the Marvel roster, like all the characters and all the series they have, like there's so much stuff like that you could get excited about, So it's a very broad question. It could be X-Men, it could be this, it could be that, it could be, but honestly, I'm not thinking about these things very much.
Yeah. So before we go, quick questions. Your favorite games of all time?
It will probably surprise a lot of people. I'm a big fan of Zelda, the original Zelda, but my favorite Zelda is the second one, The Adventure of Link. And it's probably the one that people hate the most. It's funny, but me, I was a young teenager, and this game captured my attention like no other games. And the other game, if I have a second a runner-up to that Zelda game, it would be Gabriel Knight: The Sins of the Fathers. the Sierra game on PC in the early 90s, if I'm not mistaken. And it was a beautiful game that was happening in New Orleans, and it was dealing with a lot of sorceries and things. And what was great, it was a huge mystery with very interesting characters, but also this game was presenting a lot of knowledge about voodoo, hoodoo, and all these things. And basically, I was in a drama, I was in an intrigue, but I was learning so much real world stuff as I was playing the game at the same time. So, and it's a game that captured my imagination, the art style, everything about it was great.
Yeah. So, favorite movie?
Well, I have a few. When I was a kid, Empire Strikes Back was a big one. I would say Clockwork Orange was a big one. Doctor Strangelove, it's a big one as well.
Kubrick fan here.
Yes. Shining, it's beautiful. I'm also, and I will go silly, one of my favorite comedies is Step Brothers.
Oh yeah, I love that movie. Awesome.
It's so insane. And,
on a mission from God.
That's it. And I like those kind of things. And I love, I'm a big fan of the original Blade Runner. Even Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner is fantastic. So I would say a lot of those movies. Oh, I forgot one that I'm a big fan in my favorite movie list, the Lion King.
Oh, me too. Huge fan of that. Lion King made me start working on music for games and movies.
Exactly. Yeah. Lion King, and I go all soft.
All right. So that's it. I can't thank you enough, Jean-Francois. Your games are important. They teach us about life. They raise questions. They're brave, and they make gamers feel respected. Thank you for sharing your dreams with us, and thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Welcome.
Thank you.